express my deepest gratitude to everyone here today. Your outpouring of love and support has been a great comfort to me and our family during these last 2 weeks. Today, as we lay to rest and celebrate the life of my father, Craig Rustich, I stand before you with a heart that is both heavy and full. Craig was not just my father. He was the embodiment of what it means to be a hero in the truest sense. The task of articulating the depth of his influence and the vastness of the void he left behind by his passing is a daunting one. I must confess, there's not been a single waking hour since his departure that I have not been immersed in thought about what to say on this day. How can I possibly encapsulate the meaning of this man to me and my family? He was a remarkable man, whose impact resonated not only within our family, but extended to everyone gathered here, and to many more who cannot be here today. His legacy is etched in our hearts, and while this moment is incredibly difficult for many of us, it's also a testament to the profound love and respect we all share for him. I aim to bring back to life the remarkable essence of his character, allowing us all to feel his presence and spirit and remember the extraordinary man he was. Through shared stories, laughter, and perhaps a few tears, I hope to create a sense of his wonderful presence among us, if only for a moment, as if he were right here with us again. My father's journey began as a typical young boy growing up in the 60s in suburban San Diego, an era that is much different than it would appear today. He made that point well known to us throughout the years. In this ideal setting of his youth, my father's character began to take shape. His childhood was forged by his love for outdoor activities, playing in the streets and the hillsides of San Carlos, where the only signal to return home was the setting sun. This environment nurtured his passion for competitive sports, where he played Little League and Pony League baseball, as well as Pee Wee football growing up. His activities extended beyond sports. He was a dedicated Cub Scout and a junior lifeguard. My father's character, even in his youth, possessed what many describe as an old soul, maturity well beyond his years, a lifelong trait that would remain with him to his final day. His years at Grossmont High were pivotal. The summer after his freshman year, my dad's life intersected with the world of professional sports, where he worked for the San Diego Chargers, handling equipment and holding the drive start marker on the sidelines of Old Jack Murphy Stadium. His physical stature and athletic prowess made him a natural fit amongst the Charger players, and he often joined them on the beach after practice. In high school, his athletic talents shined brightly as he excelled in football, playing defensive end. His achievements were extraordinary. First team All-American, All-League, All-CIF, an impressive record, 80 tackles and 15 quarterback sacks his senior year. However, a devastating knee injury, a fully torn ACL meniscus, curtailed his promising football career. The surgery, much more intrusive in those days, left a lasting impact on his life. Amidst these highs and lows, my father's personal life flourished when he met a charming blonde girl their sophomore year, my mother. In her age of 15, they formed an immediate and unbreakable bond, leading to their marriage in 1980. Soon after, they began building their lives together in East County, embarking on a journey of starting a family. Despite my father initially expressing no desire for children, my mother had other plans. In one of the last conversations I had with Dad, he said that having us 3 boys was the best thing that ever happened to him. He often reiterated the sentiment over the years, usually general encouragement for us to start our own families. He often reiterated, of course, it would be my mom who would give Dad his greatest gift. My brother JD was born in 1983, me followed in 1985, and to mine and my older brother's surprise, Derek in 1994. My earliest memories of my father are filled with images of a rather imposing man. To me, a wide-eyed kid, he was a mountainous figure who occasionally scared the absolute living shit out of me and my older brother. Not so much in any action, but simply in knowing there could be action. He was the quintessential man's man in every conceivable way. He was the type of man who would shave in the morning and by sundown be sporting a full beard. He had this formidable and rather intimidating presence about him. His physique was robust, broad, muscular shoulders, rounded chest, and thick forearms, a fitting build for someone who can easily bench press over 300 pounds at just 18 years old. His attire typically included a tall, laced-up leather boots and well-worn Levi's, held up by a thick leather belt, the standard outfit of a man who walked on iron beams hundreds of feet suspended above the ground. He had distinctly masculine facial features, a thick brow ridge, dark, bristly mustache, and the most impressive curly hair that would become utterly wild if let uncut for too long. His appearance was further accentuated by large welding sunglasses and the ever-present double pinch Copenhagen snuff tucked into his bottom lip. One glance at his hands revealed a man who meant business. Thick calluses, often accompanied by bloody band-aids and taped fingers. We used to marvel how he could bend back old bottle caps using just his thumb and fingers. But these traits weren't convincing enough. A look at the enormous sledgehammers and the large cut-off saws in the bed of his truck would do the trick. He once told me, ironworkers use all the same tools as normal contractors, only everything is 5 times bigger and weighs 5 times more. Despite his rugged and intimidating exterior, our father was a man whose heart was as vast as his physical stature. Beneath the tough ironworker facade was a heart full of kindness, care, and an immeasurable capacity for love. He was a dad in the truest and most absolute sense of the word, always present, always engaged, and endlessly supportive. In time, we learned something that my mother already knew. He was a gentle giant, a man who could soften his rough edges to teach us the simplest joys of life. Despite his life of working hard labor, working multiple jobs in his early years, all on a bum knee with no ligament or cartilage, it never stopped him from putting in time with us kids. Countless afternoons spent with us over the years, whether it was teaching us to ride bikes, throwing us batting practice, or catching bullpens from a hard-throwing and rather erratic son who would unleash and bounce fastballs directly into his shins. He never wavered. As the blood would flow from a gashing wound on his leg, he would fire the baseball back to me and tell me to do it again. And try not to fucking bounce it this time. His passion for our success was palpable. He lived for our achievements and took immense pride in everything we did and every dream we pursued. His love was his legacy, a powerful force that shaped us in more ways than one. He wanted nothing more than to afford us the best life had to offer. And boy, did we always want the best. Whether it was the latest or greatest baseball bat, a new heart of the hide baseball glove, an overpriced BMX bike, a new pair of rollerblades, the best gaming system, or the best stereo. Despite not having the money, Dad always found ways to provide us with these luxuries. As I mentioned earlier, Dad was an old soul. And to say that he was wise would be an understatement, especially in matters of building and craftsmanship. I often found myself marveling at the breadth of his knowledge and the skill that he possessed. He had an innate ability to pinpoint exactly what to do and what not to do in any given project. He had a remarkable knack for simplifying complex tasks, always knowing a trick or two that made a job more manageable. He had this deep Rolodex of knowledge paired with an incredible industriousness of many different trades. Measure twice, cut once, he would say. He never let a teachable moment pass without imparting some of his endless wisdom. Just as he took pride in us and our endeavors, he also took immense pride in his own work. Driving around town, he'd often point to a building and proudly declare, "Hey, you see that building right there? I built that." He'd then launch into some wild tale about the project, his storytelling as vivid as his craftsmanship. More so than my brothers, I matched my dad's passion for building, and he knew it. I often became his young apprentice. I admired and reveled in the things he built and the way in which he did them. After working the iron for over 16 years as general foreman at Draham Steel, my dad got his contractor's license and established Color Fast Painting, his very own self-made business. After long practice, he'd often make a quick detour to show me a house that he'd recently worked on. "You should have seen this place before," he would say. "Look at it now. That paint job is trick." His words always carried a sense of achievement and satisfaction. Dad, JD, and I built fences around our house over the years, and together built a batting cage in our backyard. Dad would have us dig holes that felt deeper than we were tall. Using just a digging bar and shovel, our hands would blister and tear from the work. JD was especially prone to this. Blisters larger than silver dollars would break out and ooze on his hands. We knew better than to complain. How could we possibly complain to the man who does this kind of work every day? While mixing and pouring concrete into the holes that seemed bottomless, he'd say, "This fence isn't going anywhere. It'll be standing here long after we're gone." He always believed in doing things the right way. Every project he completed was a source of tremendous pride for him. He always finished what he started, and it's because he loved to admire a well-earned and finished product. In reflecting on the many facets of my father's character, his sense of humor stands out as probably one of the most memorable and endearing qualities. He was quick-witted, with an uncanny ability to come up with comebacks that were as rapid as they were hilarious. His humor was a constant source of joy and laughter in our lives, and he never missed an opportunity to share it. He'd love to call, sometimes out of the blue, just to share a good joke, often a slightly off-color one that would leave him in stitches of a wild and deep laughter. After each joke, he'd quickly add, "Don't tell Erica that one." Knowing full well that his raunchy humor was tailored for his thick-skinned sons who had grown accustomed to his unique brand of comedy. His humor wasn't just verbal, it was also situational. It was about timing. He was the type of dad who, no matter the setting, would find a way to inject a bit of playfulness into the day. If he was waiting for you in the car and you had to walk past the front, you could bet that you were going to get the horn, no matter the setting. It was his way of keeping us on our toes, a reminder that life, even in its most mundane moments, was an opportunity for a bit of fun. My father's humor was more than just telling jokes and playing pranks. It was a reflection of his approach to life. He never took himself too seriously and always had a knack for lightening the mood. Some of you may recall his large white painting van, a commercial vehicle he purchased used and came fully equipped with flashing orange beacon lights on the roof and a reverse alarm that emitted a loud and continuous beeping sound. As Dad grew older, his carefree nature only intensified, and there was no one he loved to tease and make laugh more than our younger brother, Derek. It was a perfect pairing. Derek, a transitioning young boy into an awkward teenager, and Dad, so self-assured and utterly immune from world's embarrassments, driving a large work van equipped with flashing lights and loud alarms. When it came time to drop Derek off from school, Dad seized the opportunity to playfully embarrass him. At the peak of the morning bustle, when Derek was surrounded by friends and classmates, Dad would activate the van's flashing beacon, shift the van into reverse to trigger the beeping, and use his PA system to wish Derek a great day at school. There Derek would be, a teenager, trying his utmost to appear cool, desperately trying to disassociate himself from the spectacle. Meanwhile, Dad would be in the van, cackling in delight as he drove away. His laughter was infectious, and his ability to make others laugh was a gift that made our family life vibrant and joyful. Even in challenging times, his humor would brighten the darkest days. Dad's sense of humor was a vital part of who he was and how he connected with all of us. It was through his jokes, his laughter, and his playful spirit that we saw a light-hearted side of a strong, hardworking man. His humor was a bond that linked us together, a shared language of love and joy that we'll always cherish. In life, Dad was a straight shooter in every sense of the word. His candor and transparency were as clear as crystal. Unlike the typical dad coach, he led with unbiased judgment, always perceiving the world as it was, not by what he wanted it to be, or as he would say, through rose-colored glasses. Make no mistake, just as he wouldn't shy away from telling you that you didn't deserve something, he would just as confidently tell you the exact opposite, that you earned it, that you deserved to be in the position that you were in. This made those times so much more meaningful, knowing they were coming from such a place. Dad being a straight shooter wasn't only metaphorical. Fresh off my rookie year of pro baseball, I decided to dabble in long-range shooting. I splurged on some fancy long rifles and scopes. That winter, Dad unveiled his secret arsenal of guns, which I swear were more elusive than Bigfoot all my life. Dad was super secretive about them, just as you would imagine raising 3 young boys. We embarked on a father-son project, building a custom competition rifle. I was Dad's shadow, soaking up his wisdom like a sponge, much like I did with all the projects growing up. When the rifle was finally ready, we headed to the range just outside East County, a solid hour drive, perfect for sharing my tall tales of my own shooting prowess. When we arrived, we laser-sighted the scope, hung 4 fresh targets 200 yards down range, and were ready to go. With Dad watching, I confidently fired the first 5 rounds and urged him to check my expert shots through the scope. He peered through, muttered half impressed, "Damn, that's pretty accurate." I handed him a fresh clip and felt overwhelmed with excitement to finally watch him shoot. He was in the zone, calm and collected, looking like a sniper in the many war movies we watched growing up together. 5 shots later, he turned back and flashed me a one-eyed grin and invited me to inspect his handiwork. Through the scope, I saw what was a single mammoth hole in the center bullseye. I was floored. Was this the same guy who needed reading glasses to see the TV remote? His grouping was so tight, not a single bullet left untouched by the next. As we inspected the target up close, Dad couldn't resist gloating. I told you your old man could shoot. Eager to outdo him, I hung fresh targets. I reloaded and fired 5 more rounds down range. I sighed as I noticed my group wasn't nearly as tight. Not even close. I stepped back to give him another turn, and that's when he said, "I'm good." I paused for a few seconds, thinking he was probably just kidding since we had only got there. Still not moving, I said, "Are you serious?" He simply chuckled and said, "Yep, I'm good." I realized then that Dad had just orchestrated the ultimate dad move. He had just dropped the mic on a shooting career right there, and he would always have this epic shoot-off to hang over my head. For the next hour, I blazed through 150 rounds of ammo, but couldn't come close to Dad's legendary 5-shot wonder. As most of you know, our father was an extraordinary baseball coach. My brother and I often joked that he missed his calling for the major leagues, but instead found his true passion coaching us kids from the age of 6 right up until high school. And though he wasn't officially our coach beyond that, he was always there guiding us in baseball and in life. Despite all those grueling work days, he'd herd us all to baseball practice, not only to coach and develop his own kids, but to patiently work with the hundreds of other kids over the years. He would work with us until the sun would set. The next morning, before the sun could even argue, he'd be up, lacing up his boots and heading off to work. The house we grew up in had a large 100,000 square foot dirt schoolyard across the street. This was basically our childhood playground for me and my older brother, and the site where I would lose my 2 front baby teeth during fielding practice on a ground ball hit by none other than Dad. The ball had hit a rock, took a terrible bounce, and hit me right in the mouth. It wasn't long after that Dad brought home a large steel I-beam from work and welded chains to the beam, and with permission from our elementary school, he proceeded to drag it behind his Nissan pickup truck, leveling the dirt field flat from the trenches caused by runoff and years of neglect. After dragging the steel beam, he followed with 2 more field drags, progressively scaling down to remove as many rocks as he possibly could. He did this dozens of times over the years. Each time the field would progressively improve, and each time he would admire his work from the front yard as he sipped a cold beer. Like I said, this was a man's man, and only a man's man takes a steel beam from work to drag an old dirt schoolyard to help his kids and other kids develop in a safer playground. Days, Dad had a secret weapon for motivation, the promise of a Sizzler buffet feast after every win. For any 9 or 10-year-old, unlimited pizza and frozen yogurt was incredibly motivating. Oftentimes, our leads were so immense that before the final pitch was even thrown, we'd be dancing in the dugout singing, "We're going to Sizzler," like a scene straight out of White Man Can't Jump. Dad was a fiercely competitive man, always aimed to win, yet he was equally as gracious in defeat. Nonetheless, victory was far more common in our lives growing up. As I mentioned earlier, Dad had constructed a batting cage in our backyard, a new playground for us high school kids, and Derek as the young phenom. It ensured that we had a place to continue to earn the success that we desired. The batting cage was a modest 35 feet in length due to the limited space, but still more than capable. The pitching machine, housed in a wooden hut built by Dad and his apprentice, sat just outside the front of the cage. Behind it was a bench where we'd sit and feed baseballs to the hitter. The hut was painted white, and written in front in black paint was approximately 6 or so rules that Dad had written for us young kids to follow. Ironically, the first rule read, "No cussing." I remember Dad had made that rule out of respect for the elderly woman who lived next door. Looking back, it's amusing that Dad actually created a rule forbidding his native tongue. One sunny afternoon, my brother JD, a strong 230-pound senior, and I, a sophomore, were in the backyard working on our hitting. On this day, Dad was operating the pitching machine, feeding baseballs while I sat beside him. Meanwhile, JD was in the cage, swinging just as Dad had taught him, hard. Grunting with every swing, he was sending yellow template baseballs sizzling in all directions. Then, in a moment etched forever in my memory, it happened. JD smashed a pitch perfectly, a laser that flew through the opening feeding hole of the pitching machine, missing the machine entirely. It proceeded to hit Dad square in the forehead. Although it took only a split second, the event seemed to unfold in slow motion. I watched wide-eyed as Dad's head snapped back, the dimpled ball rebounding off his forehead and soaring high into the sky, higher than the peak of the house. Stunned, I wasn't sure who was more surprised, him or me. Yet, in quintessential Dad, he calmly turned to me and slowly moved his hand and asked, "Am I bleeding?" I replied, still in disbelief, "No, but you have dimples on your forehead now." He laughed, seemingly surprised himself, remarking that it must have hit the hardest part of his forehead, as it didn't really hurt him at all. In true Dad fashion, unfazed by the incident, he continued feeding us baseballs the rest of the afternoon. It was moments like these that defined my father, his resilience, his humor in the face of pain, and his unwavering dedication to being there for us no matter what. As we entered our teenage years, Dad, alongside his friend Steve Randall, established one of the first youth baseball clubs in San Diego, the Piranhas. He continued to coach us and hundreds of other aspiring Piranhas right up until the brink of high school. Many of these players became our teammates at Grossmont High, where we triumphed in a CIF championship during JD's senior year and my sophomore year. 7 of the starting 9 players, the core of this championship team, was a direct product of my father's coaching and leadership. He taught us more than just baseball. He instilled in us the spirit of competition and the principle that success is never given but always earned. The birth of Derek nearly a decade after JD and I was probably the single greatest blessing for Dad and his passion for coaching. It provided him a new generation to mentor and another son whose talent was as equal to, if not greater than the previous two. Even though I spent many of those years away at college and playing professionally, I was acutely aware of how much Dad enjoyed coaching Derek and his teammates. In his twilight years, he truly reached the pinnacle of his coaching abilities. As I mentioned earlier, Dad was an old soul, and this wisdom permeated his coaching style. One thing was clear, Dad rarely repeated a mistake. He was a lifelong learner with a terrific memory and an uncanny ability to understand what people were thinking at any given moment. This insight enabled him to identify everyone's strengths and weaknesses. More importantly, he had this innate sense of what kids were capable of doing in any given moment, allowing him to place them in situations where they were most likely to succeed. During one of my visits with him in the hospital, I seized the chance to glean some coaching wisdom from him. Given his health situation, I felt imperative to absorb as much guidance as I could from the finest coach I'd ever known. I expressed my doubts about having the patience to ever coach children. He reassured me, "Oh no, you'll have fun." His advice was to keep it simple. He underscored the importance of a simplistic approach to working with children, advising me to focus on one thing at a time. Something he attests he learned from a great-grandfather, Frank Rustich. Most importantly, he emphasized, teach kids to be ready. Kids are never ready for anything, he would say. If you could teach a group of kids to be more ready and prepared, you're likely going to win. During high school, Dad recognized my potential to play baseball at a high level and was determined to help me achieve my dreams. He was clear about the dedication it would require. And like a typical high schooler, I sometimes found myself at odds with his strict curfews and his stance against serious dating. Despite our disagreements, he often engaged in serious discussions with me about the future of my baseball career. Dad firmly believed that high school romance could be distracting. As I've continued to reiterate, he knew everyone, but he knew nobody better than he knew his own sons. He knew I was a mush, probably why I'm doing this eulogy today. But he feared that I might be easily sidetracked by young love. I would argue back, and I knew exactly what button to press. "Dad, you met Mom in high school." While this usually left him without a comeback, there was one time he persisted. "Brant, you'll find an incredible woman at a university of your choice if you just stay focused." Actually, that wasn't the quote at all. His exact words were, "You'd have your pick of the litter. The women will throw themselves at you." But his point were all the same. His guidance was born from understanding what was best for me. And like so many other things in my life, he was absolutely right. I met Erica, the love of my life, and now the mother of my son, Francis, for one of the world's finest institutions, UCLA, on a full athletic scholarship. Looking at them, I can't help but be grateful to my father for steering me on this path. His wisdom and insight have been instrumental in shaping my life I cherish today. This brings me to what I believe is my father's most endearing quality and perhaps the most important lesson he imparted to us. His lifelong demonstration of faithfulness, respect, and unconditional love for our mother. His love for Mom wasn't your typical Hollywood-style romance of candlelit dinners and chocolate-covered strawberries, although I'm sure he would argue differently in their youth. To us, his love was far more profound and immeasurable, founded on the commitment to provide, protect, and support our mother and her own family. It was about making sacrifices to improve our lives, about making her laugh, and about his unwavering presence, especially in times of adversity. The most poignant testament of his love was evident during his health struggles. No matter the situation, whether emerging from operations, medically induced comas, brief bouts of delirium, or severe encephalopathy, his first thought was always Donnie. Each time he regained consciousness, I want to see my wife, he would say. His singular desire to be with her spoke volumes of his love. Equally important to acknowledge our mother's devotion and love towards Dad, which was just as profound, if not more. The past decade, particularly dealing with Dad's health issues, has been a monumental task. Mom, your dedication during his final 100-day battle in ICU, where you were there by his side every day, mirrors the commitment you've shown over the past 50 years. It's heartbreaking to know you've lost your best friend. Your love for Dad was immense. His love for you was equally as deep. Thank you for everything you've done for him. Please know that JD, Derek, and I will always be there for you, striving to help to fill the void of his absence. We love you. In conclusion, it leaves me reflecting on what his absence means to me, what I expect to be a long and continuing journey of understanding. In the stillness following Dad's departure, I faced an intense feeling of vulnerability. I'm humbly aware I'm not the only man here who's lost a father, and I'm sure many of you have experienced some form of this. He'd always been my shield against life's storms, a reliable rock, the compass I could turn to for advice and direction. Lord knows how much I needed it. With him gone, I found myself grappling with the forever void of no longer having the man that I could turn to in times of crisis, and feeling more exposed and uncertain in a way I never felt before. This vulnerability, as raw as it is, has opened my eyes to the importance of building strong and supportive relationships with others. These relationships, understandably, will never replace the relationship between the father and the son, but it does make the void a little smaller. I'm reminded of a memory many years ago when my older brother and I got into an intense physical altercation. Dad set us both down, tears welling up in his eyes, something he would rarely have ever seen. He knew the gravity of what he was about to say. Someday I will be gone, and your mother will be gone. The only person we'll have will be each other. It was just one of the many life lessons that he would share, but it does make me feel a little less vulnerable having the love of my brothers as we move forward in life. Losing Dad has made the finite nature of life starkly clear. On Thanksgiving this year, we had reflected on some difficult moments in the previous few months in the hospital where his health was notably poor, where I didn't think he was going to make it. The strange thing about this conversation is it only happened because I was so sure in that moment that he was going to be fine. And I could tell he truly felt the same. But he told me he didn't remember much about those moments, and he jokingly said, "Well, I guess that's good. I suppose if I die, I'd rather not know about it." We half smiled at each other, but little did he know that after all these years of him knowing everything about me, that I'd also learned a lot about him. Because I knew in that moment, this joke was just another tough man facade, and that the deep down in his heart, he dreaded the very thought of not being here as equally as I did. Sensing this, I said, "Dad, what you're facing, I will face too someday. We all must." And it gives me a little bit of comfort that knowing wherever you go, I'm coming too. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be. I never spoke to my father in such a way. But he, neither I, said I love you more to each other than we did these past few months. Like I said, Dad was so much more than a father. He was my coach. He was my best friend. He was my biggest fan in my life's greatest moments. He was the one I wanted to show my trophies and accomplishments to. He was the one I wanted to make proud. In the past 2 weeks, I learned that losing a father like him is not as simple as just losing one member of the audience. It's a gut-wrenching feeling of losing the entire audience. Amidst these reflections, I left asking myself, how can I continue this great man's legacy? How can I possibly pass on what he has given to me, the next generation? I'm not my father. I'm realizing that we're linked in an unbreakable chain, and that someday I will pass these lessons and values to my own children so that I too can leave behind a legacy they will be as proud of when it's time for them to remember me. As we honor my father's memory today, I acknowledge the deep impact he's had on me. His lessons, his love, and his legacy are woven into the very core of who I am. As I continue my journey, guided by his wisdom and strength, I hope to uphold and extend his legacy just as he did. This past week, searching for old pictures through our childhood boxes, I came across a large, folded card with a hand-drawn heart and big words that read, "I love you, Dad." I'll conclude by reading the very words that I wrote them as a young 7-year-old on that card dated June 21st, 1992. "Dear Dad, I love you very a lot. I hope you have a fun Father's Day. Thank you for all the things you did with me. I wish I could be with you the whole time. Love, Brant."